Here's Conrad Benner.
So my name's Conrad Benner, and I'm the founder and editor of Streets Dept, which is a photo blog that highlights and celebrates art on the streets of Philadelphia. Raise your hand if you've heard of it, by the way. Oh, cool, so I can just go home. Okay, y'all know. Okay. So this is the blog on your left, and that's my Instagram on the right. I grew up here in Philadelphia. That's me. I've never showed, this isn't even on Facebook, you guys, so no cameras. This is me on the left, being real sassy, and my friend Monica, and that's Belgrade Street, back when Fishtown had plenty of parking, but not a lot else. So my blog focuses on a few things, art in the public space, and that kind of breaks down into a few different categories. So when we have art in the public space, we have the legal side of things and the illegal side of things, commissioned and non-commissioned. I'll go through the commissioned stuff first, the legal stuff, of course, murals. We live in the city of murals. This is on Front Street in Fishtown. We live in the city of murals in part because of Mural Arts Program, the 33-year program of Mural Arts. They have close to 4,000 murals across the city, and because of a lot of things, only about 3,500 still stand. But they've also inspired a culture of muralism here in the city. That, in addition with the 1% for art tax incentive, has created this sort of culture of muralism around the city. This is on Honeygrove's headquarters in Fishtown. These are a series of rotating murals from a bunch of really great artists, and that's what it currently looks like, although, again, it rotates a lot. And then that's a raccoon with a pretzel. Has anyone seen that? That's in the River Wards. It's by a young mural company called Vert Creative. So yeah, Mural Arts has been around for 33 years. They've inspired not only muralism around the city, but also these little organizations, little in quotes, that are popping up, like Vert, like Haha by Paradigm in Bella Vista. And Vert is just making a bunch of really fun murals around the city. Many of them have to do with animals and other things. There's a squirrel with a SEPTA token that is beloved, I think. It was like the Gritty before Gritty, now there's Gritty. Monuments, okay, so we have murals on the legal side, we have monuments on the legal side. This is one of the city's newest monuments. Can anyone say who this is of? Who this is a monument to? Yeah, Octavius Cato. Cato or Cato? I call Cato. Yeah, we'll have to Google that. And it's a particularly important statue in the city because there's a few caveats here, but it's the first mural or first monument to a historical African-American figure on public land in the city. It shouldn't have taken this long to get here, but it's here now, and I hope many more are coming along with it. We also have public art. So public art can be a lot of things, but right now it's this, at the Navy Yard. Have any of you all seen this? So this is by Filthy Lurker and Pedro Estrella. They're UK artists, and they have worked with Group X here in Philadelphia and the Navy Yard to create a gigantic octopus, or what is it called? The Navy Yard Sea Monster. This is only up actually for one more day. It comes down tomorrow, so if you have not yet seen it, it'll go down. But it's an inflatable sculpture here in Philadelphia. And then, of course, we have graffiti on the non-commissioned side of things, illegal. I put that in quotes because most people who are working, most street artists and graffiti writers, are doing things on construction materials or on abandoned buildings, so it's illegal really in name only. Sort of like how smoking in a park is illegal. No one's going to get arrested if you like it or don't like it. In Philadelphia, we have a very specific tag that's known around the world called wickets. It's an elongated form of tagging. Here's a really good example of it from Texas. Whoa, that photo looks really good in this light. Huh, okay. Eric, can you get a photo of that? Eric works with me on the blog. So that's an example of a tag, two tags here, Texas and Gain, two of the more prolific writers here in the city of Philadelphia. And then here are two larger pieces from them, along with Distort, another incredible writer here. This Amtrak corridor is sort of a historic place for graffiti here in the city. There are pieces on this corridor that have been up for decades, historic pieces, and a bunch of new work too. But my blog focuses mostly on street art. So again, on the non-commissioned side of things, but street art can be anything. Raise your hand if what's street art to you? What's one form of street art? Oh, I can't see hands really. Oh yeah, up there.
A lot of like random knittings on.
Yes, bring the house lights up. What?
I've seen some pop-up knittings around like pole.
Oh, like yarn bombing. Yeah, that's a great example of street art. What else do we have? Any other? Wheat paste. I think that's what most people think of. Yeah, there's a lot of wheat paste around the city. Any others? So this is by Sheldon Abba, who is a photographer here in the city. And he actually got this, he had this cool idea to take photos of people around the city. It's a comment about gentrification, about sticking together. You can bring the house lights down. It's intimidating right now. Thank you. Bring it all the way fucking down. Bring it down. Yeah, he would take photos of people in Philadelphia. It's a comment on sticking together. It's called cross-city communications. And he would install them on these abandoned phone booths around the city. Yeah, so there's photos of regular, real Philadelphians. And it's on foam core, and it stays for a long time. They're done really well. Here's another example of a sticker / wheat paste artist, Blur. Blur's story is really interesting. She was actually a sticker artist before. She had a character, and then she went through this ailment. Basically, the doctors didn't know what was wrong with her. She lost her ability to speak for about 6 months. She could only speak in vowels, and she came up with this series during that experience to get sort of her voice out there through street art. Luckily, she's dealing with it a little bit better now. She has some help, and she's able to speak again, but her series is all over the city. Have you all seen this around the city? They're all over the place. It's always that big mouth. It's called Big Mouth Series. Yarn bombs, here we go. Look, it's like you wrote this slide for me. This is from Binding Things, and the thing I really like about yarn bombs is they seem particularly ephemeral. They still feel new in a lot of ways. Yarn bombing has been around for about 10 years. And some artists do stuff around poles, do stuff around trees, and that stuff's okay. But I prefer stuff like this that, I'm not judging it. Well, I guess I am judging it, but I like stuff like this that either interacts with the environment or is political in one way or another. And Binding Things here took this, you can see this like crack in the ground there that exposes dirt, and did yarn bomb flowers coming out of it. So there's a lot of people who don't like President Trump. Have you all noticed that? Including myself and 90% of Philadelphia. So there's a lot of political street art right now. Street art has always sort of reflected the times and sort of the mode of the country. It's or the mode of the city, the vibe of the city. It's one of the reasons why I like street art even more than murals and public art. It can really reflect what's happening. This is a piece by Joe Borschow that popped up. Do you remember, he tweets a lot, but do you remember like last year, he was tweeting at like 4 in the morning all the time, and everyone was like, Jesus Christ, what the fuck is happening? Like, someone give him NyQuil. This was a response to that, sort of. I think that's pretty obvious. But that's what I love about street art. And Joe Borschow, of all the street artists doing political work, has done a lot of work around politics the last couple of years. So this is an example of a wheat paste, and that's one of Joe's favorite spots. This is 8th or 9th and Spring Garden. So if you're ever there's usually new stuff. Does anyone know who this is by? This is a pretty popular Philly street artist who says he's Philadelphia's only comedian street artist, or he doesn't say that, but he is one of Philadelphia's only comedian street artists. His whole idea is just to put a smile on people's faces. He's usually not political, and he usually doesn't have a big message behind him, but he did do this piece to talk about illegal dumping in Philadelphia. It was really interesting. So he used humor to address that issue and ended up getting a lot of press. A lot of street artists don't get press in Philly.com or Philadelphia Magazine. It's one of the reasons why I started Streets Department 8 years ago now, or 8 years ago in January, was to call attention to these things and these artists and these installations that I really liked. So it's always really interesting to me when pieces go into sort of mainstream Philly press. I think Philly press is always kind of looking for an angle, and this had an angle, so it worked for them. But it was pretty interesting. And then this, there's a lot of street artists, a lot of female-identified street artists who are doing work around street harassment. There's Tatiana Fazlizadeh, who is now in New York, but started her campaign, Stop Telling Women to Smile, when she was a student at Temple University. And this is also by a group of women who went to Temple University. They're called Pussy Division. And about every year, sometimes twice a year, they do a different campaign around calling attention to street harassment and various issues that women deal with in the public space. So if you can't tell, those are like, those like grandmas in like South Philly that have those like fake flowers that are like wire and that kind of wrap around. I got a bunch of those and wrote the words "End Street Harassment" on a bunch of construction material around the city. That was about a year ago. So who owns the public space? That one always gets a laugh. By its definition, we all own the public space. Oh, everyone's camera's out. Yeah, that's okay. We all own the public space, and maybe we should have more of a say about what goes in our public spaces, right? Should our public spaces reflect our values? Should they reflect our hopes and dreams for our city and our communities? Should they reflect our histories, unjust or just? This is a question that I like to raise with the blog and through different installations that pop up through the city. Of course, this is a statue to who? Frank Rizzo. I go to so many classrooms where the kids don't know that, and I thought, like, it's in the news so much, you'd think, well, whatever. So yeah, Frank Rizzo is easily one of Philadelphia's most divisive mayors, if not the divisive mayor. And we live in a city that doesn't have statues or monuments to any mayor, period. We don't have any statues or monuments to any individual from the last 100 years. So why would we have a statue to this divisive person in the middle of our city? It doesn't make sense. So of course our mayor is now saying it's coming down. It looks like the timeline for that is in question right now. But this was done in 2012, and it was done by Ishnitz, another yarn bomber here in Philadelphia, and she put a bikini on the Rizzo statue to call attention to his sexism, his racism. She included an artist statement with her piece. Okay. So why is the public space so important? I wrote y'all in there, okay. I believe the butterfly effect is real. You know, what we see and experience in the public space has a great effect on us. I don't think advertisers would spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year on outdoor advertising if it didn't affect the ways that we think and the ways that we feel and the ways that we behave. Right, we're buying Dove soap, we're going to Disney World. Oh, did I go back? What we see in the public space is having an effect on us. So I think that we should have an ongoing conversation about what we put in our public spaces. And I'd prefer to see less and less ads in the public space, especially ads like this that are on eye level, or what was an ad. A lot of street artists are taking back the streets. This is a series called Yeah, We Got Keys for That. There's this New York artist who went to basically every metropolitan city in America, was able to make copies of all the bus shelter ads. And if you email this gentleman, he will send you the key for your bus shelter of your city, and you can replace it with art. So this is one by Joe Borschow, also done in the early days of Trump when everyone thought the stock market was gonna crash, but it didn't, actually rallied when he first came in. So it was his sort of comment on that. We have NDA here, who's done an illustration replacing an ad. And then we have our comedian street artist. I'm really bad at pointing this, I think. Nuber. This is by Kid Hazo. It's an ad for Nuber, and it says, driving you absolutely insane, one wrong turn at a time. Did anyone take Uber here? It's going to be surging when we get out here, I can tell you that much. Recently, I worked on a campaign called Trashcan Takeover. Earlier this year, a bunch of the trash cans in Center City, these dumb solar panel things that don't really do what they're supposed to do. There's so many reports that these aren't worth the money and they're not really green and they don't help us save time or energy. Google it. But the city replaced a lot of what were previously pieces of art on these trash cans with ads that said cheap Jeeps. Did y'all see that? Cheap Jeeps. It was everywhere. It was all the rage. There were 400 ads on eye level in Center City that said cheap Jeeps in our historic district, in our shopping districts, all through Center City, and it sucks, right? Like, again, if we're talking about public space, do you want to be walking around and see a message like this from these pink lips, or a message that says, buy cheap Jeeps? I'd rather have artists use the public space to reflect our values and the human experience. So after I wrote that post complaining about the cheap Jeep ads, Brendan Lowry of Philadelphia reached out to me. We found a funder through City Fitness, and we were able to buy back 18 of these ads and replace them with art. So this is just a few of the artists that we did that with. Again, these pink lips. We have one here by Marisa Velazquez. This is, of course, she took Penn off the William Penn, off the City Hall, and put a woman in sort of modern day clothes that says, you belong. And then we have this message from Saeed Ferguson, whatever you think you can do or believe you can, begin it. See, I'd rather see that walking to work or walking to the coffee shop than buy cheap Jeeps. You know, if what we see is going to have an effect on us, I'd rather walk through my day with that in my head. Do you guys agree? Are you all like, you're all ad people? Okay, Jesus Christ. Is there a better use for public space? I should line these up differently. Anyway, I think so. Maybe you've figured that out. And over the last few years with Streets Dept, again, I started 8 years ago, and it's gotten pretty popular. I was able to quit my job in advertising 3.5 years ago to do this full time. I have a part-time employee with Eric Dale. I have an intern. It's insane. We live in crazy times. But I've also been able to focus since that time on exhibitions and things in the public space that I think use the public space and are in the public space in ways to promote various issues. This is one I did with Covenant House, PA. It was called Am I Cut Out? Basically, Covenant House, PA is one of the only youth homeless shelters in Philadelphia, and they had to turn away over 500 children in 2015. Children, teens who are 18 to 24, a lot of whom are trans individuals or gay kids who get kicked out of their house because they come out. And it's all a funding issue. They just need more money. With more money, they could have more beds. Youth homelessness is really interesting, not interesting. It's very different than chronic adult homelessness. So youth homelessness, most of the kids just need a bed for a few months. They're in a transitional period. 90% of the kids in youth homeless shelters are in school or in work or both. So we did this campaign to call attention to this and to raise money, and it was one of their most successful campaign they've ever done. Covenant houses around the country are now doing similar campaigns with art in the public space to call attention to their funding needs. Signs of solidarity. Did any of you hear about this? It was right after the election of Donald Trump. I got a beer in a bar, and I was mad. Were you guys mad? And we're thinking of things that we could do. So we got together a group of artists, and we emailed a bunch of businesses and institutions and organizations around the city, and we said, hey, listen, we have this campaign to create we want our public space to reflect our values of love, inclusivity, and togetherness in this time where we felt like the country was being torn apart and led by, in our opinion, someone who was hate-filled. So we got permission from places like La Colombe, Johnny Brenda's, 30 institutions and businesses, some homes around the city, and we got 35 artists to collaborate on 30 banners around the city. This is by Aloysius McIlwain. Simple message here. Well, there's a lot of messages, but it said, build bridges, not walls. Here we have one by Nero that sort of flipped Trump's tagline. It says, hate won't make us great, on a residential house in Bella Vista. This was by Gloss Black. It said, say positive. We wanted the artists to say whatever they wanted. We didn't curate it too much, so they all went in sort of different directions. This was one by Monica O that was, we all kind of needed to laugh. It's saying, like, we'll get over this MFer, but it's also saying, like, he has hair problems. And this was one of the more pointed ones, and we put it in the most historic place that we got in Head House Square. It says, let's build love, trust, unity, and not hate, lies, and walls. That summer I worked on a project with actually Visit Philadelphia called Revolutionary Art, where we put 13 pieces of art created by 13 Philadelphia-based artists who were challenging the social and political status quo around the historic district. So you had people or artists like Michelle Angelo Ortiz, who does great work around calling attention to undocumented Philadelphians. Nero again, I loved his message with signs. I wanted to pull him in here. Created a message, you belong here, in a park, Franklin Park. Kelly, oh, her last name just left my head, just like that. Well, go on my blog and search Kelly, but, and Revolutionary Art. She does great work in the Kensington area of Philadelphia around the opioid epidemic and addiction, and what she does is she works with people experiencing addiction and their families and loved ones to create messages that she then weaves together to represent unity, and they're weaved onto twigs that she finds in abandoned lots in Kensington. Zoe Cohen did illustrations of women activists from the 20th century, and we projected that in the National Constitutions, or the National Jewish History Museum. And Aubrey Costello, kindness doesn't indicate weakness in Kensington. Still graffiti writer. Oh, and then Sean Theodore. So this was the one that I think got photographed the most. So Sean Theodore, do you guys follow him on Instagram, Sean Theodore? He is one of the best photographers in Philadelphia. He's incredible. And when I reached out to him to be a part of this exhibition, he was doing a lot of work around Black representation in pop culture. I thought that was really interesting. This was on Alfred's Alley, and I did 5 site visits here, and every single time I went, maybe it was just when I went, I don't know, it was just groups of white people, and I thought, oh, that'd be an interesting place to have Black representation on this street where there's a lot of white tourists. He took the idea and brought back this, which I thought was really interesting. So basically, this is an image of a Black woman's face. The contrast is weird right now, but it's a beautiful image. And the woman is wearing a head wrap. And he's cropped it in such a way where you're not meant to know if it's a woman from the 90s, from today, or from the colonial era, but on this alley where there's literally people walking around dressed up in colonial garb, it's hard not to see her as someone from the colonial era. And what does that mean? It means that she's potentially a woman who is either enslaved herself or knows people who are, or sees it every day. This is a part of a conversation Sean wanted to start about how we use the public space, right? He is from Philadelphia, but he spent a lot of time in Germany. He's from a military family. And he talked about how in a lot of German cities, you can't really go very far without coming into contact with a piece of art, a monument, a stone on the ground that reminds you of the Holocaust. This is also a time when we started planning this, when Germany was letting in 1 million refugees and we were fighting over letting in children. We're still having that fight today. So we were just having the conversation when we were planning this piece, like, does using the public space to address your unjust histories help to build a more empathetic society? I don't know, but it's a possible way to go. America has hundreds of year history of slavery, of enslaving people, and it's hard to walk through even our oldest cities like Philadelphia and come in contact with that history. So I thought it was an interesting thing. More recently, I worked on To the Polls. Did you hear about this? I worked so hard, you guys. No? Raise your hand. Give me hope. Okay. I'm almost done too. To the Polls. So I had this idea to, my blog and my Instagram is all funded by advertising. So I see sponsors and advertisers and brands using art and social media to promote their brands. It's great. It helps pay my rent and helps hire Eric Dale. I'm not against that. But I thought, hey, you know what? This is a really important election, as they all are. Every election is the most important election ever. Can we use art and social media to encourage civic engagement and going to the polls? So I worked with Mural Arts on this. They were our funder. We had an exhibition in a gallery space in Spring Arts. It was 10 days in October, the last week you could register to vote. But the reception was incredible. We got close to 1,000 people who came out, dozens and dozens of people registered. I'm still unsure of the exact number. And we got a lot of people saying, like, take these to the street. So Mural Arts gave me a bit more money. We rented these U-Haul trucks, and we rigged this. This was very precarious. The dude who did this was like, don't go over 15 miles an hour. And we were like, oh, Jesus, okay. And then it rained the day we did it, whatever. But it was very cool. So you have a bunch of murals here. There's just a few photos of this day. And we drove these around the day before the election just to remind people. And our goal was to, we'd stop at different intersections. We basically treat it like a democracy ice cream truck. We would go very slow. This is how they're telling me to go. Okay. And then we'd stop and people could come and take Instagram photos and promote it. So many people that day were using these photos on Instagram to promote voting. So up next, talking about the public space. Is there a digital public space? Is the Google Doodle a monument? It's a whole conversation. It's 20 more minutes that we're not going to do right now because it's almost time to go. But I want to have these conversations in the digital public space of a podcast. So last year I started a podcast, the Streets Department podcast. If you want to pull your phone out and subscribe right now, feel free. Streets DEPT podcast. Oh, look, it's right there. How easy. Take a photo, save it for later. And we interviewed 9 incredible guests last season. I'm about to launch this second season. So I think I have some photos of some of the guests we had, oh, Jesus, last season. So I'm not a graphic designer, just so you know. Well, we had Helen Gim. My Instagram and my blog focuses on art in the public space, street artist, muralist. But I wanted to take a step back, do a wider view of creativity, of creative minds. So the podcast is interviews with the creative mind shaping the world around us. So we did have, we had Elseed, a graffiti writer from France. We had Swoon, who's one of the most prolific street artists in the world, based out of New York. But we also had local people like Helen Gim, who I think is a really creative city council person. And Raquel Salas Rivera, the newest poet laureate here in Philadelphia. So season 2, we have a bunch of great guests lined up, and I hope you subscribe. I didn't see a lot of phones come out and subscribing, so just figure that out. But thanks, y'all.